I feel like this video has been a very long time coming. So I was trying to figure out what video I wanted to do for today, and I realized that I never updated my favorite contemporaries video from 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, I was just starting out BookTube. I hadn't really read a lot of contemporaries, or really a lot of books in general. Like, before I started BookTube, I wasn't really reading like as much as I am now. I wasn't completing every year my Goodreads goal, and so I didn't really have like a lot of books to choose from when I made that video. But now, 3 years later, after I've read at least like almost 200 books in the past 3 years, it's like I finally have enough books to feel like I can do an actual list of favorite contemporary books. And so that's what I'm doing today. I really want to talk about some of my favorite contemporaries. I want to put a disclaimer that I am not necessarily a contemporary reader. It's not my favorite genre, but I do have quite a few that I absolutely love. Okay, so we're going to start off with the books that I actually don't own physically. And the first book that I want to talk about is probably my all-time favorite contemporary book. I just love it so much. And the more that I think about it, the more that I watch the movie, I'm like, yes, this is my favorite. And that book is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. And I read this book last year as an audiobook. I literally read it in one sitting. It was super fast. And I absolutely fell in love with this book. Like, literally, I fell in love with it. I love the characters so much. And I love the story. It's just so heartbreaking, and it twists at your heartstrings. And like, I'm a total sucker for like love at first sight books, or like love at first sight stories. I know that a lot of people find them cheesy and I know a lot of people find them unrealistic, and I totally get it, but with The Sun Is Also a Star, it's just so perfect. And it really, like, Nicola Yoon makes you believe in their love story, and I think that that's the most important thing, especially in teen contemporary like romances, because like, if you're not going to believe in a romance, if you're not going to believe in the chemistry between these two characters, the whole book falls apart. But with The Sun Is Also a Star, from like the second that they meet, I get it. I totally understand it. I love their banter. I love the way that their two personalities mix so well together. So this book follows both Natasha and Daniel. They are two teenagers living in New York, and Natasha and her family are going to be deported in the following day from like when the book takes place. And Natasha's trying to get her family to stay inside the US. So she's like going and having all these meetings with these people, trying to make it so that her family doesn't get deported. And then there's Daniel, and he's going to an interview for college. And so they are living two completely separate lives in New York, but then this one day their paths cross and they end up falling in love, and it's really beautiful, and it's all in one day, and it's just breathtaking. It's such a breathtakingly beautiful book. It's painstakingly heartbreaking and just amazing. I love it so much. The writing and the storytelling in this book are so exquisite. I just like, I want to like read this book 25,000 times. I've seen the movie like at least a dozen times now. It's so good. Also, as an honorable mention for like love at first sight books, The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight is a really good book. I don't know if I said that correctly. The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight. I'm sorry, I have a lisp, so it is very difficult for me to say S's. But I love that book so much. Another really great like love at first sight contemporary book where like I actually believe in this relationship. It's so cute. I cry every time I read these books. Like, literally both of these books make me sob uncontrollably. And I've actually read The Statistical Probability twice so far, and it's definitely one of those kind of audiobooks that I would like revisit constantly. So the next book that I actually don't own physically is Here We Are Now by Jasmine Warga, and I've talked about this book quite a few times on my channel, and I love it so much. This is a book that I really haven't been able to get out of my head ever since I read it. So if you're really into music and like kind of like old school rock stuff, you might really enjoy this book. I actually don't think that it was very old school rock. I think it was actually more like 90s rock, maybe late 80s, early 90s. I don't remember, but I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Basically, the premise is that this teenage girl doesn't really know who her father is, and her mom won't like explicitly say who the father is, but she has a feeling that it's actually this famous rock star, and she's been writing him letters being like, hey, I think I'm your daughter, I don't know, like I think these things really line up, so I might be your daughter. And he never really answers her letters until one day he shows up on her doorstep and is like, yeah, I'm your dad. And it kind of just goes from there. It's such an interesting story. I really love the way that the author kind of wove together these two stories of both the teenage daughter and then also the parents, of like when they had first met and like their entire relationship, what happened, what broke. And it was just so beautifully done. It's a really short book, and she like really packs a lot into such a short book, but it's so beautifully done. I love like all the music references, and I think something I really liked about it was that it didn't feel super dated. Like I feel like a lot of times when it's not a historical fiction like set around a musical band or whatever, it can kind of feel a little bit dated when you try to put like these older bands or music or whatever into a contemporary teen novel. But it really worked because we weren't really focusing necessarily on the band itself. It was just more of like the culture of music and family and relationships and stuff like that. And it was just kind of like, oh, the dad happens to be in this band and he happened to play in like the 90s or whatever. So I felt like that was done super well, and it didn't feel like it was trying to alienate like a teen readership. The next book is The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord, and I loved that book so much. It was such a sweet contemporary. The characters felt so realistic, and everything that they were going through felt really realistic as well. Just like all of the relationship drama, the friendship drama, the college drama, like trying to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And I really also felt like it dealt with the topic of grief so interestingly, because the main character loses her boyfriend before the book even starts. And this was like not really a boyfriend that she was super in love with. It wasn't a boyfriend she had been with for a long time or like had really strong feelings about, but of course she still cared about him. And he ended up drowning, and it was like really sad. And there were constantly people coming up to her and giving them their condolences for her. And it was so interesting to see that played out in a way that wasn't like, oh, this girl has lost the love of her life. It was just this girl lost her high school boyfriend that she had known for a couple of weeks. It wasn't like a super long-term relationship, and it wasn't something that like they had been together or had been friends for a really long time. It was just like they had been together for a little bit, and then he unfortunately passed away. And I felt like that kind of grief was so well explored, and it's definitely not something that you see a lot, especially in contemporary teen fiction. And so I really appreciated that. I thought that that was so well done, and it was definitely a book that I did not expect to like. I was actually gonna unhaul it because I'm like, I don't even know if this is like my kind of book. I just hadn't really thought that it was going to be a book that I enjoyed, and I was worried that maybe like the grief would be a little bit too much. I'm not super into books that deal with grief, but then I ended up reading it because I had a couple of friends on Twitter who were like, yeah, you should totally read it, it's really good. And so I trusted their judgment, and they were totally right. It was such a beautiful book. It was done so well, and I felt like it was a really good balance between like grief and romance and just like typical teen stuff. And so I really enjoyed that book. I thought it was really great, and I'm surprised that more people don't talk about it. So those were all the books that I actually don't own, so I'm going to close up my iPad. The next book is one I read a while ago. I think actually like 2 years ago, maybe 3, I don't remember. But that is When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon, and I love this book so much. I really enjoy Sandhya Menon's books whenever I read them. And I also want to give an honorable mention to There's Something About Sweetie. I loved that book. I read that book last year or this year. I can't remember now. Was it last year or this year? Either way, I really enjoyed it, and it was so cool to see really positive fat representation, especially with someone who was super athletic, because it was something that I could totally relate to in like middle school or high school. I'd always grown up super athletic but also fat, so it was just kind of like interesting to see that played out in a book. But talking about When Dimple Met Rishi, I really love this book so much, and it's coming to Netflix. What? I'm so excited. Like, this book literally gave me so much life. I really love the dynamic between Dimple and Rishi. I just found it to be so intriguing, the way that like Dimple was like kind of more rough around the edges, and then Rishi was like a super like romantic and like the type of guy that like loves love. I just thought that that was so sweet. Like they're just such opposites, but they work so well together. And I think like just it has like the most iconic scene of all time of like any YA contemporary romance, and that's when Dimple throws her coffee on Rishi when he's like, hey, I'm the guy that you're like gonna marry, and she's like, you're weird, throws the coffee on him. It's amazing, it's iconic, the best scene, and it just really makes this book an A+ in my heart. But overall, I feel like Sandhya Menon does such an amazing job at writing super realistic teenagers who do teenager stuff, who make mistakes, who say the wrong things, and it's just so well done. I really love her books, and I really need to read the other one. I can't remember what it's called. Oh, I need to read From Twinkle with Love. I think I own that book somewhere. I just don't know where it's at, but I need to read that one as well. But I did love There's Something About Sweetie, and I really loved When Dimple Met Rishi. They're both such cute books, and I love them. Highly recommend anything by Sandhya Menon. The next one is another one that deals with grief, and that is Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welch. I love this book, and I especially recommend it if you really like the movie Mamma Mia, because it definitely reminds me of Mamma Mia if it was set in Italy. And this book is set in Italy, and it's following this girl whose mom has just died, and she ends up going to live with someone in Italy who her mom knew and might also be her father. She's just not sure. So like I said, this is another book that deals with grief, and it also is really interesting because the main character has her mother's journals, and she ends up getting to go to all of these places in Italy where her mom talked about, where her mom experienced things, and she's trying to figure out who her father is, what kind of person her mom was, because she feels like she hasn't really found that connection with her mom. And I found this book to be both really very sweet and also super moving. I felt like it had a really good balance between her trying to figure out more about her mom and like who her dad is, and also the romance that happens. I felt like the romance is also really well developed. So I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was so sweet. I love the setting of Italy. I would love to read more contemporary set in Italy. I just think it's such a beautiful setting, and I just found this book to be so sweet. I really need to read more books by Jenna Evans Welch. I just haven't gotten to them. I'm telling you, I'm not a huge contemporary reader, but I really want to read more books by her. The next book is also one that I talked about a lot on my channel, and that is Annalie in Real Life by Janelle Milanes, and I love this book so much. I read this book in one sitting, and Annalie is just one of my favorite characters. I don't know why. There's something about her that's just so realistic. She has a lot of realistic feelings about her father finding someone new, especially after her mother died from cancer. And so I just really liked the characterization of Annalie. And I also love that this book has a fake dating trope. It's just my favorite trope. I love it. I will read literally anything that you throw at me that has a fake dating trope, especially if it's like set in high school. I don't know why. I think it's just like the To All the Boys I Loved Before vibes. But this one was so intriguing. I just loved it, and it has such an interesting ending. Like, it was an ending that I've never really seen before in a YA contemporary, and I just loved it. It was so refreshing. It was so, like, it just really bumped up this book for me on my list. And I loved it. Like, this entire book was so much fun. I read it in one sitting. I could not put it down. It was like watching a movie in my brain. It was so good. And really, I felt like I could relate to Annalie a lot because she's super shy. She's not very popular in school. She's also described as plus size, so there were definitely a lot of things that I felt like I could relate to with Annalie, and I liked seeing her get out of her comfort zone and really find herself. This is definitely more coming of age than romance, so I would definitely keep an eye out for that, or just like keep that in mind if you're gonna read this book. Definitely more coming of age than romance. The next book is one I read super recently, like literally this month, and that is Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender. And oh my gosh, I want to scream from the rooftops about this book. Kacen Callender really did that. Like, they created this story and wrote this book, and it's perfection. Like, I don't have anything that I would change about this book. There is no criticism for this book for me personally. I loved it. And I think it was also super refreshing because I have read a Kacen Callender book in the past, well actually like this year, and it wasn't really my favorite. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was good, but it was just like meh. This book blew my mind. I loved it. It was so interesting getting to see Felix kind of like explore his emotions, explore his sexuality, explore his gender, and really figure out the kind of person that he is. And this is also a really good coming of age novel as well, but this one is definitely more coming of age and romance mixed together. I do want to warn anybody that hasn't read this book that there is a blackmail element to this book, kind of like Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, where the person is like threatening them, sending them like messages and stuff like that. And that part is super upsetting, but I do really like the way that it's resolved. I really love the way that it's handled. And I feel like this book is just super realistic in the way that Felix reacts to the things that are happening to him and like the people who are trying to antagonize him. And I just really loved it. And I felt like it was a really good exploration of gender identity and sexuality and, you know, teen love, teen romance. And it was just really, I loved it. It was just so well written too. Like the prose itself was really beautiful, and I really liked the kind of like mixed media aspect of it almost, because it did take place in like text and email and stuff like that. So I really like this book, and I totally recommend it. I feel like if you haven't read it yet, you need to. This is one that you don't really want to keep on your shelf for too long. The next book is another one that I talk about a lot on my channel. I just love it so much, and that is Grace and the Fever by Zana Romanoff. Oh my gosh, I love this book. It's like totally one of my fangirl books. And I think what I really love about this book at its heart is that it's about fangirl culture. It's about like boy band culture, and as a like OG Jonas Brothers stan, I loved it. I loved the Jonas Brothers. I know that she wrote this book mainly about One Direction. I also loved One Direction in high school, but I didn't love them as much or at the same intensity as I loved the Jonas Brothers. So when I was reading this, I thought a lot about the Jonas Brothers. And I feel like there is a lot of really good crossover between those two bands anyway, especially with like the fans that they share. So I really loved this book. I thought it was so wonderful, and it was so true to like actual boy band fangirl culture rather than like kind of making fun of it or making it into a caricature of what it is. It feels like Zan really got it, and I'm pretty sure that she is also like a One Direction stan. So I loved it. I thought it was so well done. It was really perfect, and I love the way that it almost reads like a fan fiction, but it reads like someone who loves fan fiction and takes it seriously wrote this book. And I think that's what I really love about it. That's what I really, you know, respect about this book, is that it's not trying to make fun of fangirl culture. It's not trying to make fun of fan fiction. It's really taking it seriously and being like, hey, these are actually really good stories. So yeah, if you were like a stan of like One Direction, Jonas Brothers, 5 Seconds of Summer, any of those kind of boy band groups, you're gonna really like this book. It's so well done. I absolutely loved it. I will say that there is a lot of like One Direction references, and the fact that like the same kind of One Direction drama is in this book. So I don't think that you need to be necessarily like acquainted with it in like the deepest sense, but I do think that it's kind of fun to make those connections when you're reading it. So I think it's just like an extra layer. It's not necessary, but it's just really fun. And the very last book that I want to talk about is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I love this book. Kat from Paperback Dreams, it's her favorite book, and I finally got to it last year, and I know what the hype is about. It is beautiful. It's just gorgeous. I love the way that it's written. It's very atmospheric. You really feel like you're there with them and you're there in these characters' heads. I just loved it so much, and I love that it also kind of shows off some like podcasting stuff, some fan stuff. I thought that that was really interesting as well. And I think something that's really cool to know about this book is that the chapters are super short, and I know that people love short chapters, and so I didn't know that going into this book, so I was kind of intimidated because it is kind of a thicker contemporary. It's probably one of the biggest contemporaries that I own, and so I was like, oh no, this book is gonna take forever to read. But no, this book went by in a flippin' flash because the chapters are super short. They're very engaging, and like because the chapters are short, it's like only the most important information. So you're really flying through this book. It feels so wonderful, and it's such a different story than what is typically told in teen contemporary, and I just really appreciated that. And I love that it doesn't really focus a lot on any like the romance or anything like that. It's really about, you know, friendships and family, and I really appreciated that. So I love this book. It totally lives up to the hype for me, and if you've heard the hype, if you know that Kat from Paper Bag Dreams loves this book and you haven't read it, you need to read it. It's just so good, so beautiful, and the characters are just absolutely amazing and iconic and life-changing. Okay, so that was my entire video. I think that I really like this updated list of like favorite contemporaries. It really feels representative of my actual taste in contemporaries, because I feel like looking back on that old video, I'm like, that's not me. I can't relate to those books. I'm just like, I don't know why I chose them. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!
Ooh, I thought it'd be me and you.